Hi, this is Brandon from Watches on You. Today we're at Continental Jewelers in St. Louis Park, Minnesota, taking a look at a very interesting watch. This is the Breitling Colt Skyracer. And right away, I want to remind you again that we're here at Continental Jewelers in St. Louis Park, Minnesota. They are an authorized dealer of Breitling and many other premium watch brands. So now let's jump right into this watch. So this watch is completely constructed of a new material called Breitling, which is, it sort of feels like a plastic but looks like a carbon fiber. They actually don't release what it's made out of. And I was hearing from a representative here at the store that they actually never patented the material because they don't want anyone to know actually what it is made of, but I can assure you it is very light. Without the strap, the case weighs 34.20 grams, which is super light. I think there's been kind of a push towards light sports watches in recent times, and this watch definitely kind of plays in with that. So again, the case size is 45 millimeters. It actually looks a little bit smaller than that, and I'd say it wears as like a 45 millimeter, but then it looks a little bit smaller than that, and that's kind of because there's a lot of empty space on the dial, but it just kind of relates to how the font looks on the case. So getting into the movement, it's got a Breitling caliber 74 movement, which is a super quartz movement, and that means it's basically a thermocompensated quartz movement. It's very accurate. And one thing that also means is that if you want to get it serviced, you have to send it to Breitling, but you shouldn't really need to get it serviced. They're very reliable movements. So kind of getting into other technical details, it's got a 100-meter water resistance, so that's basically perfect for any sporting activity that you'd be doing. It'd be fine to swim with. And I mean, realistically, I'm sure that the water resistance is actually higher than that, considering the overall case construction is very similar to other dive watches that Breitling makes. And I think a lot of companies kind of do that. They probably only rate it to certain things to sort of place different watches in different places in their lineups. I don't think that would be in actuality, but sorry for rambling on about that. I just think that it'd be cooler if they kind of were a little bit more transparent about that. So now moving on to the strap, which is very interesting. So this watch comes on only rubber straps, and the strap itself is actually quite interesting. It doesn't actually have spring bars, even though it looks like it. And that is because the straps have various like measuring tools on them, or a ruler, I guess, on this part. And then this, I'm going to assume it's sort of like a ruler, but the units are in kilometers. And I'm going to guess that that's for using on a map. So if you're navigating or something, and that kind of plays into the whole aviation heritage of Breitling watches. But so going back to that other side with the ruler, you can actually very easily detach this part of the strap from the watch. And you do that by going right here and then kind of twisting it up, and it actually just slides right through the bottom. And now you can lay this flat on a table and measure various things with it. So that's kind of a little interesting feature. And then to put it back on, you slide it back through from the bottom, and you pull it through, and as you can see, those sort of bars right there keep it tight on the case. And then these other little bars that are actually made out of the case material, you just kind of put into the band itself. So now I'll move on to a wrist shot. And as I said, the case diameter is 45 millimeters, and I think that it looks a little bit smaller than that just because of how this watch... It's pretty much because this watch is actually very similar in overall case design to other Breitling watches that are smaller. So that's probably why I think that, but the lugs are relatively far apart, so I would guess that's probably why it wears more like a 45. But again, I don't think it really looks all that huge or anything like that. So even if you have a pretty small wrist, I think that you'd be totally fine with this watch. And I have about a 6.5 inch wrist in circumference, just to kind of give you perspective on that. And actually, I should move on to the price. So the price of this watch is $2,000, and that is $1,850 for the case and $150 for the strap. The strap is actually available in other colors. There's a green that you can also get, and I think that That's a reasonable price for this, considering Breitling quartz movements are very high quality, and the case is actually much cooler in person than it looks online. Online, again, it looks kind of like a plastic material, but it actually is, I would say, much nicer than that. It looks like a forged composite if you really play with the light and kind of get in close and looking at it. The overall bezel action, it's very similar to other Breitlings as well. So this watch, even though it's much cheaper than most Breitlings, the quality is really the same. Again, the only thing you're kind of losing out on is the quartz movement, but that's probably not that big of a deal for some people, and some people might actually prefer it, considering that this watch is for sort of very active lifestyles, and mechanical watches aren't always conducive to that. So if you like this video, please remember to subscribe and share, and remember we're at Continental Diamond in St. Louis Park, Minnesota. Thank you.